So good morning, everyone. Today is the 20th of August, and I wanted to talk this morning on a subject that I was asked to speak about in the UK a while back as a guest speaker for an event on how do you get to the point where you can live your dream. And I want to kind of tie this in, of course, to what we need to do in Nikken to make sure that we get to the point where we are living in a way that is harmonious with the purpose for us joining in the first place. Everyone has a reason why they say yes, a reason why they join Nikken, a mission that they want to fulfill, a cause they want to be a part of, or something that needs to be achieved in line with that whole ethos and mantra that Nikken has promoted for almost 45 years, which is humans being more. That, when it's internalized, is all about, of course, us becoming the best version of ourselves. And the Nikken business model is really a catalyst, isn't it, for creating change in our own lives in a way that can help us to become more, or more importantly, to become the best version of ourselves. So what I wanted to do is just kind of share some salient points of what we need in order for this to happen, for us to become the best version, and to use Nikken as a vehicle for that. And of course, what we don't need. Sometimes we think we might be handicapped, compromised, or shortchanged based on our circumstances, our upbringing, our contact list, maybe our existing skill set, maybe some disadvantages that we may have where others may seem to have certain types of privileges that they were born into or have developed or acquired along life's path. And we go, is that what I want to do, is kind of put some of those myths to one side and just say, what do we really need? If we want to grow this business, if we want to succeed, if we want to get the right results, if we want to become the best version of ourselves, what do we really need and what do we not need? What can we do without? So first of all, and I'm going to use some examples, both Nikken examples and just life in general examples, to highlight my points as I go through this. So first of all, what we don't need is we don't need to have all the skills. I was up at Dave's and Valerie's over the weekend, had a great time there, and after one of our meetings, one of the questions that was asked to me was, I've been in the business for a little while, all the people that I sponsored and got me going, and my personal group that I got developed, they've all fallen away. They've all stopped building the business or they've quit. He said, so I have to start all over again. What advice would you give for starting all over again? Right? He looked a little disheartened by his circumstances. I said, well, first of all, you're not starting all over again. I said, you may be starting from scratch in regards to building your team, but you're not starting over because you've got all of the wisdom and experience that you've gained from what you've already done. And that gives you a significant advantage over your original starting point, which is great. And there are plenty of people that I've seen at every rank of the business make that commitment to say, I'm going to start all over again. Not because they got it wrong, but because sometimes it's that mindset that's required to get going and to move forward and to get to that next level of achievement. But critically, we always start with new knowledge, new skills. But when we did get started originally, we didn't have any of that, and that worked out for many just fine. I think it's been proven industry-wide that the majority of recruiting in our industry typically comes from the new people in the business. They do the lion's share, don't they? There's far more people that are recruited by the silver and below ranks as they're kind of pushing through those first 90 days than there are for those that have been in the business, 5-10 years on. So we see that skill isn't necessarily a prerequisite. I know in the greatest responsibility of my life, which is being a dad, I had zero experience when my oldest child was born. There was the only way I could get experience in that most important and critical never-ending task and responsibility of being a father, the only way for me to get that experience was to simply just be a dad. Yeah. So sometimes the best way for us to get experience is not to read the book or to attend the meeting or to jump on the webinar, though all of those things are important. The best way to do it is to just be a distributor. Just be it. And we find that as we be, we learn to do. And as we do it better, we learn to be. So it can be a virtuous circle. So step number one, what we don't need is all the skills. Hopefully that's a wonderful reassurance message. We don't need to get bogged down in a perpetual state of learning, but never finally becoming, because the only way to become is to do. So the next thing is to ask. I always encourage you constantly, if we can just learn to ask more. We're great at building relationships. We're great at talking to others, but at some point along the way, we need to invite someone to do something. We need to have a call to action that bridges the relationship from having an opportunity to offer value to actually offering value. So we need to ask. I have found all the great critical points in my life where there has been meaningful change. It's come because I or someone else has asked. When I was at Nikken and I was managing director in Europe, Kurt came over to the UK. We had a product launch going around Europe, and he explained to me that he'd been tasked with finding a new president. Mr. Watanabe was retiring from chairman, the position of chairman, and he was being asked to become chairman and CEO. He couldn't be chairman, CEO, and president. And he said, so you're gonna have a new boss soon, and I'm gonna have to find a new president. What did I do? I asked. I said, well, I'll be the president. And fast forward literally a couple of months, and I became the president of Nikken. If I didn't ask, I wouldn't have gotten. Fast forward again, I'm having a conversation with Dave Johnson. He asks, and he says, Ben, some critical change happening in the field right now. It would be great if you stepped in and filled a gap. I hadn't considered that, but he asked. And as a result, he's now my sponsor. If you don't ask, you don't get. And I would encourage you to be confident in asking as much as you can and learn to get outside of your comfort zone, because we don't need to have all the skills, but if we can develop at least that one where we learn to ask a little more, it can be remarkable what will happen as a consequence of doing that. Don't prejudge people. Yeah, Michelle's just raised a really good point. The answer is always going to be no unless we ask. And that does kind of lead to my next point. Don't prejudge. We can't assume whether someone will be interested or not. I remember once, I grew up playing jazz. I was a jazz trombonist, and that totally preoccupied my teenage years. And I was always playing at jazz festivals, on evenings, weekends, at corporate events, or wherever it might be. And I remember one time I was at a national jazz festival in a place called Tauranga in New Zealand. And I hate to say it, I think I had a bit of an ego at that time. I hope I don't have one as much now. We all have an ego to some point, so this is a confession. But I had a bit of an ego as a jazz musician. And I remember being at this jazz festival, and there would be main events, and then there would be little places where you could go to listen to different jazz groups, and you could just go around all these different places to listen to different bands, or you'd be performing in different places. And then, of course, it'd be the big ones where everyone would gather for the main shows and what have you. And I noticed that you'd bump into a lot of the jazz musicians playing at different places or talking with the other musicians. And I noticed this one guy, silver-haired man, probably in his early 60s, that was just in his element, loving life. He was the happiest guy you'd ever seen at this. He was like just a die-hard follower, loyalist of everything that was going on in this jazz festival. But I noticed that I had never seen him pick up an instrument and play. he wasn't a musician, he was just a fan. And in my pride, I judged him. And I thought, yeah, wannabe. If you really loved the music this much, you'd be with all of us with an instrument and you'd be playing. And what a harsh judgment that was. But I judged him for it, for not being a musician, for just being in the environment, but not really doing it. You know, if you really loved it, you'd be playing, right? And then fast forward about 6 months, maybe 9, and I'm in Auckland, and a friend of mine is playing at a jazz club down at the waterfront, and he's invited me and a couple of our musician friends to come and listen. He wanted to kind of explain a certain point that he'd been teaching as a musician and as a music director. So we went along to listen, and as I'm walking in to this jazz club, I see that man, and he's standing out the front of the jazz club. And this is a very kind of premier location, waterfront in the city center, really posh place. And I see that gentleman, and I go, look who it is. And he sees me, and he goes, I recognize you. You're from this Queen City big band. I said, yeah, I am. And he goes, well, hey, welcome to my club. My club's your club. You're welcome here anytime. And then all of a sudden, I was forced to eat my words or eat my thoughts. I thought, oh my gosh, the reason he knows all these jazz musicians and he's friends with them is because he owns one of the best clubs in town. And next thing I know, I'm there in the jazz club. And I was quite young, and I looked young, so people were looking at me going, are you old enough to be here? I was getting that kind of a look. And next thing you know, there's a break in the performances, and he gets up on the stage, and he welcomes me and my friends as special celebrity guests in his club, and we end up getting a round of applause, which was great, but didn't do my ego any good, of course, when I already had one. But it certainly taught me a valuable lesson. Who am I to judge? Don't look on the outside appearance and think that you've measured someone up at first glance and that you know them. You don't. And that taught me a really valuable lesson. And it's important that we give everybody a chance to say yes or to say no. But let's not prejudge whether someone will be interested or whether they will be capable. We just don't know what can happen. I've seen some very skilled and accomplished people in this business struggle. And I've seen other people that really lack some of those skills and that education, and they go out there and they fly. You just don't know. Dennis and Ruth have just said, my fear isn't that someone I know will say no to me. My fear is that they will say, that someone I know will say yes to someone else. Dennis and Ruth, that is a profound statement. Work with that one, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, let's not be worried about them saying no to you. Let's be worried about them saying yes to someone else. That's what you don't want to have happen. So another point, you don't need to believe. I mentioned this in San Diego. I've heard this so many times, and I do quote Mike DiMuccio on this a lot because he raised this point again, reiterated it for me when I was on a call with, or at a meeting with my UK group. And we often say that the starting point here in building a business is you've got to have belief. Yeah, that's a critical starting point, or at least a fundamental element of succeeding in achieving your goals. If you don't believe it's going to happen, how are you going to make it happen? Yeah, and I get that. However, belief is experiential. And if you're just getting started, or if you've set a new goal, and I'm looking at some people here in the room that are setting goals with new ways of doing the business. You've been around for a while, but you're experimenting with new ways to grow your team and to grow your organization. So this comes into that. When you've got new goals, when you're developing new skills, when you're trying new things, is belief the starting point? Paradoxically, no, it's not, because belief is experiential. We get belief as a result of experience. Yeah? What happens is the starting point is wanting to believe. That's the starting point. I want to believe that this is going to work, so I'm going to do it. And the critical point then, when we move from that, the starting point is to want to believe, and then what is critical is we have to look for the right things. I read a great story online. I'll just share it real quick this morning of a lady that's at church, and she says to her pastor one day after church on a Sunday, she says, "I'm sorry. I'm just letting you know I'm not going to go to church anymore. I'm out. I'm calling it quits." And the pastor goes, "Why is that?" And she said, "Well, there's so many hypocrites. I come here on a Sunday and I see people while you're teaching your sermon and they're on their cell phones, and they're not paying attention and they're doing this and they're doing that. And, I just can't do this. So I'm out of here." He says, "Before you leave, I want you to do something." He said, "I want you to take this glass of water." He fills a glass of water to the top. He says, "I want you to go around the chapel twice with this glass of water. And the goal is simply this: don't spill a single drop, and then come back to me." And so she does. And she goes around and she gets back and he says, "Now, did you spill anything?" No, I didn't." "Okay, oh, great. Let me ask a question. While you were doing that, did you see any people on cell phones or being hypocrites?" And she said, "Well, no, I didn't, because I was focused on my glass." And he said, "That's exactly right. It's what you focus on is what's going to cause you the chance to move forward or move back. You're focused on the wrong things, right? You've got to focus on something else here." And then he went on to teach a point relevant to, where she should be on a Sunday. And so my point is this: when we start with this desire to believe, what then needs to follow is a critical focus on the right things. What do we focus on when we want to believe and we don't have the skill set yet to really get to where we want to go? And yet, of course, is the imperative. What we focus on is we look for evidence that we can do it. So we want to believe, we take action, and then we look for evidence through our activities that success lies before us. For example, maybe the starting point is, I'm going to build my contact list, right? If that's going to be a starting point for someone, I don't think I've got 100 names that I can come up with. Well, as you start to go through that list, you can start to, rather than look at all the things you don't know, start to look for all the things you do, and you can start to build that out, and it can grow from there. I'm going to build a website. I don't know where to start. Well, as you start to move forwards, you find some people that can maybe help you with that. You look for some templates, you move forward, and step by step, you look for your successes, and you don't look for the obstacles. You don't look for the barriers. You don't look for the rejection. You don't look at the no's. You look for all the things that help you say yes. It's so important that we get the right balance in what we focus on, in focusing on the right activities and also the right evidence for us to move forward. There will be always, in reality, reasons for people to say no, and that includes you. There will always be reasons for people to quit and to give up, and that includes you. But there will always be reasons for people to stay in the game. There will always be reasons for people to have greater hope. There will always be reasons for people to have greater confidence. So Mrs. Kramer has just said, what about this reframe? Going back to the earlier point, someone I know might say yes to someone else if I never give them an option to say no to me. Again, this point here of how we position things in our mind really plays a part. So to quickly reiterate, to really grow and get to the point where we become the best version of ourselves, where we get more out of our business and achieve better results, we don't have to have all the skills, either to get started or to get restarted or to learn a new way of building our business. We shouldn't prejudge people, because doing that can lead to some terrible problems with our ego, but it can also lead us to either not asking or allowing someone to go somewhere else versus teaming up and partnering with you. And we don't know how good someone might be. We've got to give everyone a chance. We don't need to believe. That's remarkable. What a wonderful starting point. We simply need to want to. Isn't that great? And then we need to look for the right evidence. We can look at the negatives or the positives. There is always a tapestry of multicolors, and we've got to decide what we choose to focus on as we grow our business and as we develop ourselves. But what we choose to focus on will largely influence what we become in life. Are we all or nothing? Are we discounting the positives in our lives? One of the great negative thinking patterns that hold so many people back is they focus on the negatives and they discount all the positives. We need to make sure that we avoid that. So let's not discount the positives and focus on the negatives. Let's look for the evidence of good things in our lives to grow the business. We also don't need to have total vision. But we talk about this, and I talked about this, this need for vision when I was up with Dave and his team up in Idaho earlier over the weekend. Leadership is all about vision, and it's about communicating it well to others, yeah? But one of the challenges that we have as well in our desperation, aspiration, inspiration, whatever it might be, to become more, to change, to be the best version of ourselves, is sometimes we don't know what that best version looks like. I want to be a better version of me. Maybe that's the desire right there, yeah? But I don't know what that best version looks like, and thus, what steps do I take to move in which direction? That can be confusing. But reassuringly, we don't need to have crystal clear vision in order to move forward. We simply need to have enough light in front of us to take a couple of steps. Haley Simpson, or Molly Simpson's daughter, Haley Simpson Pacey, posted on Facebook this morning. I saw that. I thought, what a profound thing that she said. And this is such a simple point, but it kind of blows my mind a little bit, is we're only ever given enough energy for one day. Isn't that interesting? We can get so preoccupied with everything we've got to accomplish this week, this month, this year, to achieve our goals or to change or to become, but we're only ever given enough energy to get through one day. At the end of every day, we always need to fall upon our bed and get some sleep, and then we start again. So there's some great value in that, in understanding that if we can just take our progress one day at a time and say, well, at least what do I need to do today? What's my starting point for now and moving forward and becoming better? And that might be some simple tasks of, there are some people that I need to speak to. I need to just be mindful of the opportunities around me. This is one thing that really impressed me over the weekend, being with Dave, was he was constantly in the mindset of wherever he was, there was always an opportunity to talk to someone, to invite, to extend an invitation to participate, to offer value, to offer service, to help, to do good. He was just in that zone constantly. And I think that's because he's been doing that for 29 years. He maybe doesn't even realize he's doing it. Maybe he does, I don't know. But it's just become a part of him. But sometimes that's all it takes, is a commitment today to be mindful of the opportunities that come my way, and then to be willing to act when it does. Yeah? Maybe that's the starting point. Maybe it's, I'm going to take my website one step further. I'm going to take one step towards getting my ad campaign going online. Maybe it's going to be, I'm going to book my ticket to this next event. Whatever it may be, I can take a step forward. Maybe it's going to be, I'm going to read another chapter of this book, and I'm going to try to face my fears in this way or that way. Define it how you choose. But the critical point is, we don't need to have a super clear vision of what I'm going to become in order to be my best self, or to make my business perfect or the ideal. It doesn't need to be crystal clear. I hope that's reassuring. Sometimes the greatest struggle that I've had is getting that clarity of vision of where I want to take my life. And it's been wonderfully frustrating and perplexing. And sometimes it's good to have that battle inwardly, to figure it out, to wrestle with it, to understand and to learn. But it's also good to be assured I don't need to have perfect clarity. Wrestle with it, get that desire strong, no more than desire to start, like I said before, but get that desire pretty good. And then you'll go from there and you'll make things happen. Because that desire really plays an important part. Because what we do need is we need to want it bad enough. What does bad enough look like? Well, that's a great question. That's perhaps the most critical question. When I say I don't necessarily have to believe, but I need to want to, well, it comes down to how much do you want to? because it's that want and that desire that will really drive everything else. Yeah. And it can start small, but if you want it to grow, you got to make it grow. I'll finish with this story. I was at a meeting in Birmingham in England, and we were talking about the need to have that why. That why really feeds or fuels the desire, doesn't it? To act and to become. And it overrides the I don't believe yet, or I want to, and all that kind of stuff. That's what fuels all of that stuff. And I said, what is your why? In order to really grow your business and to get to this point that we've been talking about, you've got to have this strong why. What are some of your whys? This one lady raised her hand and she had a compelling why. She said, my why is I want to make a difference in people's lives regarding helping them live a healthier life. I want people to live a healthier, more robust, physically fit life. And the reason for this is I've just recently overcome or beaten a terminal illness. And this is, I've been really sick. I've been at death's door, but I'm out of the woods. I'm feeling great now. And the energy that I have now compared to what I had before, oh my gosh, I feel fantastic. I've got this new lease on life. I've got this sense of gratitude for health and vitality that I never had before. And her eyes are sparkling, and she's having a hard time keeping herself on her seat as she's sharing this compelling, overwhelming purpose and desire to help people appreciate and value their health because of what she's gone through. And I was thinking, oh, what a great why. This is good. This is what I wanted. As a facilitator of discussion, this is just something fantastic. I was grateful for that contribution. And then the lady in front of her goes like this, very assertively, raises her hand. I said, yes. And she goes, Ben, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be difficult, but I have a concern with that. Eek, this is going to be awkward. I said, well, what's your concern? And she said, well, I've never had a terminal illness that I've recovered from. She says, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that I want one. But that significant experience gave her deep emotion that has given her a compelling why and desire. I don't have that. I've not had a life-changing experience. She said, I feel like a big tree with little roots. How do I get that big why, that big desire, if I haven't had that big experience? I thought, that's perhaps one of the most profound questions I've ever been hit with. I asked the question, I said to the audience, how many of you feel the same? And the vast majority of them raised their hands. Isn't that reassuring? For the vast majority of us, we haven't had that big overwhelming experience where they go, hey, because we've heard it so much, haven't we? I've got financial freedom now because when I joined this business, I was nearly bankrupt, or I was bankrupt. I was on the bones of my bum. I was at death's door. I had this experience or that experience. And then this happened, and then boom, things turned around. I wasn't going to let that happen again, and life changed. And we go, oh, that's compelling, it's inspiring, it's motivating. But I haven't had that experience, which means that story motivates me for a moment versus that experience personally motivates me for a lifetime. There's a difference, isn't there? So she said, well, what's the solution? I said, well, the solution is in the very metaphor that you used. You said you're like a big tree with little roots. The reality is all of us start out like a little seed that gets buried in the dirt. And sometimes in life, we may feel like that seed that's got nothing but dirt piled up upon us. And we can't see what's happening beneath us as we're starting to lay down these little roots. And we're gonna start to grow a little bit. And from the outside, above the ground, as time ticks on, we don't see anything happening. Nothing's changing. But if we keep nurturing the soil, watering it, tending it, pulling the weeds out, and looking after that little seed, over time, it starts to grow and little shoots start to come forth. And over time, as we continue to nurture it and look after it, it gets bigger and stronger. The critical thing is, for the vast majority of us, we are like that little seed that grows over time and through seasons into a mighty oak. It doesn't happen overnight. There are occasions that we read about, that we get inspired by, where people get a sudden burst of growth. I never had one of them as a teenager. I didn't have a single growth spurt in my entire life. All my friends, shut up. I didn't. But many of us witness that outside and see these people have a big growth spurt because of a major life experience that may be a challenge, a point of opposition, a particular, because to me, suffering and adversity seems to be the greatest teacher of all. But for most of us, yeah.
I just need to say something. I've really had an aha here. You know, I've been doing that slide with those little sprouts. Michelle and I do that, watering them. I mean, we've been watering so many blessed sprouts. You know, it's been 21 years for me. Yeah. I think this key is getting to that why. And so it isn't just watering it. We need to be really asking the questions to help them get down those layers, you know, that pulling off those onion skin layers so that they can feel the emotion and get down to what is underneath that why. I think this is critical, really critical. You really hit the nail on the head today. And I think it's that emotion. And that's what Mike, I think he's here, maybe he isn't, I don't know. But the vibrations, that until those vibrations are there, that's when you just get busy and do, and the rejections don't make a difference.
Yeah, no, you're right. And on that point, it makes me think of C.S. Lewis, the British author, who said, you don't learn the strength of a wind by lying down, and you don't learn the strength of an army by giving in. I'm paraphrasing a little bit. And my point in sharing that is, in order to drill down and help people uncover their why, and allow that nurturing process to develop, the way to do that is to confront ourselves. And to learn how to do that. What is it that that frightens me? What is it that scares me? What is it that makes me feel uncomfortable? What is it that I want to be and become? We've got to learn who we are in order to learn how we can be better. But we don't do that by lying down or giving in. And this is why I say that the business of Nikken is such a catalyst for us becoming more, because it requires us to get out of our comfort zone, to fly against the wind, to swim upstream, to fight against the army, so to speak, and face our fears, overcome challenges, learn new things. And it's in the process of doing that we will often discover. So again, and that's why it's a step-by-step thing, Madeline, because, one, we explore, we ask the questions, but we've also got to do and apply in order to get the real answers. Because it's in what happens when I get a rejection. Because we learn how badly we want something when we do something. When I'm building the business and I get rejection, or I get a no, or I realize there's something that I didn't know that I thought I did. And then I've got to learn all over again. It's at that point that we go, how badly do I want this? How much am I willing to really commit, to really sacrifice to become who I want to be? That's what's really important. How much do I want it? How badly? And you only discover that by doing, and unfortunately, by suffering. Joy and suffering are two sides of a single reality. They coexist on the same coin.
If we keep suffering from the rejection, then we're not going to be, and I get people saying you're too pushy and you talk too much. So I'm listening to that, and I need to listen more. So it's just getting to an emotion that's more positive. And I couldn't agree more, but what I also agree more about is this is a topic that'll turn us all around, everybody here that's looking at one another and listening.
Well, thank you, Madeline. Our time is spent. I would love to go on this, and maybe I'll go into kind of part 2 next week, because I only got through a part of my notes on the subject. So maybe we'll continue this conversation next week. But the critical thing is, as we conclude, we've got to uncover what we want to be. That starts out small. And it starts out small because most of us begin this way and don't have the major opposition or suffering experiences that some of these inspirational stories that we read about are, that give us the real impetus to move forward. For the 90%, for most of us, to become and to grow and to build that desire, it's a little step-by-step process of exploring and digging, but doing and doing and doing and learning through trial and error until we become and discover who we really want to be. But Nikken as a business is a catalyst for all of that. It's a wonderful catalyst in helping us to become our best versions. So I hope we look at this and say, let's use Nikken as the catalyst to become the best version of me. I think we can do that. We've got the resources to do it, and we certainly have the support team around us to give us the encouragement and the helping hand and the lifting arms to get us along the path and to help carry our burdens when they get a little heavy. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate the feedback and the comments. Really good. Time well spent as always. And we'll do part 2 next week. Take care.